Alright, so I'm just going to walk through having a couple issues, but I figured I'd just show it. This is where I'm stuck at. Trying to get this set up. Having a little bit of a hard time getting states to be set up for the entities. This is the stuff that I did move over. I'll show. So I have the music shut off, so it's not going to continually play. Alright, so the loading screen comes on, and then here, that's my new animation for the snake. This is now doing a seek behavior where it is going for me. There is a little bit of issues. For some reason, it doesn't want to go down when I'm ray casting, but I do have it avoiding boundaries using raycast avoidance, so it won't keep itself there. The issue that I see is that it's not going down. And then my roving NPCs, they're now also using steering behaviors, and they're tracking focal points that I have. I have assigned to each roving NPC 4 focal points that they need to be focusing on. The player itself, he's now moving using steering behaviors. Each touch point is creating a entity that basically is empty, except for having a steering component and a couple other things. So that's what he's going towards. So you'll see that little green circle, and then it disappears once he hits it. There's a couple issues with that, but for the most part it's working. So steering behaviors, this is a component. Now it's not really using the whole data bag idea, but this was the easiest way to get it set up with Ashley ECS. So I'm setting my steering component is really implementing the steerable for the GDX AI, which is giving the directions and doing the speed for getting the player to the location. And then I can access that by setting up, I have steering presets that I got set up, so I can try each one and do like a variation like blended or priority steering, where I can add multiple things in there. So the arrive will slow down the player once they hit a certain tolerance. The seek is basically just giving the vector outputs for the seeker to head towards the target. Raycast avoidance, I have 3 rays that are getting sent off, 1 that's in the direction of travel, and 2 that are acting as like whiskers, that when they do get hit, so I had to implement this a raycast collision detector, but specifically for box 2D, and have my collision components on there. That's not what I was looking for, though. Anyways, so I set up my raycast with the raycast collision detector, and then when I populate them, so that's in my physics manager here, I'm creating the component and then saying what body belongs to the steering component, because that's what it's aiming towards, and then I can set the steering behavior kind of on the fly. So for the roving NPC, I have a new system that I was working at getting set up, but The NPC I have where it's pulling the entity from its data component that it's going to steer towards, and that was pulled from the focal points, and I'll show that. So this is me setting the steering behavior, and then I have, you know, my direction set up on how I want it to move. Okay, so in the map manager, for the data component, it's really just a data component, but I'm calling a method that I have created in here. So each touch location that I do is spawning a steering location, which all it has just a position, a type component that I can use for collisions, a box 2D body, a collision component that it's going to hold so that I can test for the collisions, and then I'm just adding that. So I need to have the steering component to be able to steer towards it, so it doesn't need to have itself a steering behavior. Now for the getting those focal points, here is okay, so I'm basically starting here. I'm getting the map focal points from my tiled map. So I have here all of these dark black squares are the focal points for those maps. Eventually these are also going to be used for the camera to focus where the camera is going to be for like each quote-unquote room. And then what I'm doing is I'm pulling random focal points here. I'm pulling random focal points, and then, oops, that's not the right one. Nope, that is focals. Nope, okay. Focal points. This one is where I'm getting my random positions after I've created entities out of them. Okay, this one, spawn focal points, is where I'm taking all my focal points, those vectors, and I'm calling my spawn steering location, and I'm passing in the X and Y coordinates to basically create another array of entities, but I'm calling them focal locations. And then I'm going in, calling those focals, all those entities that will create those X and Y values, and I'm pulling 4 random ones. Then that's what I'm assigning to the roving NPC. So I basically have it set up so now it's no longer using the random component or the move to components. I don't even need to use the velocity. They're all moving based off of steering behaviors and the data components that I'm giving them. So the data component that I have for the roving NPCs, they're holding those focal points. So let's open that up. So I have a number of things that I'm holding right now in the data components. So I'm holding an array of entities that I'm calling locations. That is what the roving NPCs are pulling from. For me, in the collision system, the player, as he comes in contact with one of those focus points, I'm then removing that entity and destroying the body, and then I can set his steering behavior to null. So that's when he stops moving as soon as the player ends up running into one of those points. So that's also stored in that data component. And I also worked on parsing out X and Y coordinates for each portal to set up. That's getting stored in the data component for the player, as the collision system is really only for the player. So as a set now, those locations get stored in there, and then what I was working on doing, but it's airing out the system, so I have it not working right now. In my map manager, if I was calling the player again, since he's already created, it would transform the Box 2D body to those locations that I can pull the data keys out for that hash map. It's just not working exactly how I want it. It's kind of on and off if it does it. I do have, I'll show you. If I go to the dungeon, it's not setting me right outside of the portal. It's bringing me all the way to the location that I was on the last map. I did have raycast on the player itself, on Redbeard. It was slowing down the character and making him so he couldn't go down. So I got to figure out what that is. So this is actually the last area in the map. If I go to show you on tiled, this is the last area right here, where I'm basically having the boss, and then this is going to be where the orb is. He should be spawning here, but he's not. So, and that's because I don't have it linked up where it's doing the correct spawn locations, but it is loading up the map, and I have all the entities on there. I do need to also figure out maybe like the points, having them delete themselves if another one is tapped. Doing some type of singleton. But steering behaviors for the snakes also work here. They're set up. So now, and I have the collision where it's showing up. Right now I just have it, see it's showing collision enemy. So then in my collision system, that's where I can end up setting up for the enemy or the enemy weapons. I can have, I get injured. So my health stored in that data component can decrease if I get hit by an enemy, and I can play around with that. So for where we are at Trello, the last piece that I really needed to do, this was not really working. When I would stop the play, get him to where he was within a certain distance of the focal point, he wouldn't really kind of stop, but his animations were continuing to go and wasn't working correctly, so I didn't get these other two set up. But I did fix the bug for the portal being recognized. I can have the player move based off of tap locations using steering. So now I can set up for using a blended steering and have them do some raycast avoidance. I just gotta, optimize it a little bit. The entities, were originally set up where they were moving randomly. Now they're not using the random components or the move to system anymore. Now they're using steering behaviors. I showed you that the snake was created. And then I showed you the focal points that I did for that. Oh, that was shell 1. Okay. So that's it. That's where I'm at right now. Obviously, I know that there's some bugs, but it's coming along.